Okay, today I want to welcome my students to a new development, a new area where I'm going to look at how to develop a formidable project concept, or what we call concept paper. You see, we would call it concept paper or project concept. Why do we call it that way? Concept is from conceiving, imagining, creating, innovating, coming up with an area that has never been handled, and therefore it is within your imagination, within your creativity, that brings that aspect of bringing forward what your readers need. But for our case here, I am going to be very much in particular to our tertiary colleges, that is colleges and higher institutions like universities. So this is where we see this happening. But I would want also to pass a word of caution. Whatever I'm going to explain, you might find that you've not realized it in your university or whatever. There is a realization and a basic understanding that each university is likely to come up with its own structure of a concept paper, or rather what we are calling project concept. But the essence is the same. You would find generally, when you look at what has been presented, it has the aspect of universality, as much as a few subheadings might differ, but you might find them to have been taken care generally within what is presented. So let me go straight to my lesson today. Now, the introduction of my lesson goes around to help you understand what is a concept paper, what is a project concept. Now, why do we go for this? Let me go back a little bit. You see, before you do anything, you must start here. Before you do any research, whether at college level, degree level, master's level, PhD level, you must go through this. Though, as I said, some universities don't even consider some of this. But I expect the following. Before you do a research, you must develop a project concept, what we are calling concept paper. Then once your supervisor has come in agreement with you, he certifies you now to move forward and develop a project proposal. Then after you've done the project proposal, once it is certified, then you move to do your full research, and therefore you come up with a dissertation or a thesis. That is it. So what am I saying here? I'm saying this. I'm saying that a concept paper is meant to give the university an informed idea of the applicant's areas of research interest in order to avail the necessary assistance for them to develop a full research proposal and allocate supervisors to give necessary assistance. So why we write a concept paper is to make our university, our department aware of our area of interest and what exactly we want to research on, and therefore it enables the university or the department to choose a particular supervisor, a particular doctor, a tutorial fellow, or a professor who is very much acquainted in that area of a student's topic that would be able to offer academic advice throughout proposal development and throughout the whole research, and finally the writing up of the project report, or what we call dissertation or a thesis. So what else are we saying here? We're saying that applicants should therefore be as specific as possible. Don't be general in as far as your area of research is concerned. You must be very, very specific, because when you are very specific, your data, your facts will focus on that opinion area that you have actually come up with or narrowed to. I'm also saying that concept papers vary in format and specifics depending on the university, but are generally concise documents containing accurate, relevant information and persuasive arguments to enable decision making. To enable what? Decision making. So the aspect of being specific and the fact that there is a concise kind of accurate and relevant information which is persuasive in nature, it enables the department, the university, to make an academic decision about this area of study. Then I'm also saying that this guide, how I'm going to guide you now, the guidelines I'm going to give are intended to guide applicants on how to develop the concept papers as part of the application process. So here I'm going to dwell on enabling you to understand how to develop a formidable concept paper or concept note or project concept. So you will find that the process of developing a concept paper has several steps. It has several steps, just the way when we are writing, before we do the writing, we have to do the pre-writing before we move to drafting, editing, and whatever. So number one, what you have to do as a student, number one, select a research field. Select a research field. A research field could be general, like science, physics, social science, it's general. But now, out of it, you narrow to a given particular area of interest. So, I'm saying each university has got specialized fields of research, and therefore students have to research within those fields only. If your department is engineering, you cannot study or carry out a research in biological sciences. No, and even universities are specialized. There are technical universities, science universities, medical universities, business universities, and what have you. So you make sure what you are going to do, the area should be within the academic jurisdiction of your department or university. So it is a requirement for the students to clearly select a research field as only offered by the university, and anything outside what is offered will not be acceptable. Yeah, so will not be acceptable. So you make sure whatever you are doing is within the university or the department or the faculty areas of jurisdiction. For example, a student cannot select robotics as a research field when it is not among the ones offered within the university. You cannot do that. You cannot start working on robots when even your country doesn't understand the usage of robots. No. So the student selection will be always guided by the list of the research fields that have been clearly listed by the university. Every graduating year, the university, the department, the faculty comes up with a list of various fields which it's asking students to pick, to select one area and do research. Number two, after you have selected your research field, try to generate an area of interest. How do you do that? This is an area where you have a curiosity, meaning from the field, you now generate an area of interest because the field is large. But now from this field, you pick, you select, you generate an area of interest that you do research on, and that should be an area which you are curious about. So make sure your level of curiosity in that generated area of interest is very high, so that you don't get troubled during the process of writing your concept paper or concept note, or what we are calling project concept. What are you curious about? That's a question that you have to ask yourself. So within the general area of specialization or field, where you wish to do your research, that's very important. So a student who wishes to specialize in public administration could, for example, be curious about public service values, if your faculty is to do with administration. So what else are we saying here? A student who wishes to do research in computer science may be very curious about systems security or internet fraud. So may want that becomes an area of interest. A student who wishes to specialize in business administration may be curious about the increasing corporate governance crisis. So this is a very interesting area. Or a student who wishes to specialize in management may be curious about management styles adopted by chief executive officers in your country. So the selection of this area is influenced by a number of factors, including the following. So what really helps you to get an area of interest? There must be underlying factors, and these are the factors we want to look at now. The first factor which influences your selection of interest area is that the applicant's knowledge of the state of scientific discipline of his or her area of specialization. The knowledge you have about a particular area can influence your selection of area of interest. Number two, the applicant's knowledge of the social problems can also influence you. The applicant's personal values and research expertise in a particular field can also influence you, because when you are an expert, when you are a guru in a given area, you would want to do research in that area that you are familiar with. Also, social premiums. The aspect to do with social premiums, about welfare, about NSSF, about retirement benefits, authority, and what have you, national insurance, or whatever fund, yeah, health insurance fund, and what have you. Then another thing that can influence you is practical considerations and accessibility to the research subjects. Yes. How can you be able, how practical is your research subject? How accessible is you to the population from which you draw the sample and be able to subject it to study as a surrogate? Also, financial constraints. Applicants must gauge their financial strength to select an area of research, because some area of research would require some amount of money, colossal amount of money, and of which as a student who is not yet employed, it becomes a challenge. So you might find, because of the cost of doing research in a given area, a student can opt to do there or not to carry out research in that area. Also, I'm saying that the applicant's research paradigm, that is qualitative, quantitative, orientation, or both. You see, every researcher has a paradigm kind of biasness, especially given the fact that he is biased in a given area, and that could still influence him doing research in that particular area. Because what happens is this: when you are familiar, when you are an expert in a given area, you understand even the gaps that exist in that area in terms of areas that research has not been done before, because you are familiar. Because you are familiar with that area. And lastly, could be educational background will determine what initial knowledge the applicant can bring into the research. So being knowledgeable in a particular area is very, very, very important. It's very, very important. So from here, we shall be moving to, let me move to subsection 3, where I'm much interested in, in looking at, because after you have done the first two, now as a student, what you do next, choose one of the areas of curiosity and develop some specific questions, what we call question framing. So out of the areas you've seen, yes, you might be curious in almost all of them, but which one are you more curious in? So you choose that one. So many research questions can be classified as follows. Like, we can have a research question which is exploratory, meaning just trying to find out about something. That is exploratory question, just trying to find out about something. Then another question, question number 2 that you formulate, is a descriptive question, meaning here you are just trying to obtain descriptive data. Descriptive, just obtaining information as it is. So you only describe. So such as average age, yeah, you cannot change age, average age, income, etc. And question number 3 can be explanatory question. Explanatory questions, explaining. Here you are trying to explain the relationship between variables, like your major in college and your future earnings. You see, what you will major in college or at the university. Let me elaborate on this. Like when I was in Form 1, I was introduced to 3 faculties. I was doing economics, I was doing political science, called government, and I was also doing geography. So I was in 3 departments. That is according to Nairobi University structure. Then as you move up, you come to second year, you are still doing the 3. When you move to third year, you either drop 1 or 2. So if you drop 2, you measure into 1. If you drop 1, you measure into 2. That is it. So what am I saying here? I'm saying that when whatever you measure at the university in relationship to your future earnings, you can carry out, you can ask a question which is explanatory and which is trying to bring into context 2 variables, independent variable and dependent variables. So you would want to see how measuring in a given area could impact or influence your earnings in future, or even your probability of getting employed. Yes. So when you are doing that, you are trying to find out, is a question which is asking about relationship, whether it will be positive or negative, and if first of all, is there a relationship? Yes or no? The next question, is the relationship direct or inverse? Then number 3, is the relationship, whether direct or indirect, is it significant? Yes or no? So you think about answers to certain questions. It is common for a good researcher writing a concept paper to ask the following questions. So we want to look at a few questions that you can ask yourself when you are choosing areas of curiosity. So like you could ask, what will be the research unit? So what do we mean here? Will the study be on individuals, groups, structure, or systems? That's what we call research units. Then question 2, you would be asking yourself, what is the level of research? Because researches have levels. Don't just summarize them to be at the same level. No. The first level, relationship between individuals. Relationship between what? Individuals. Second level, relationship between individuals and groups. Individuals and groups. A third level is relationship between groups. Relationship between groups. Okay. Another question would be, what key variables are to be explored in the intended study? Which key variables? Yes, we know in title there'll be independent variables and dependent variables. But out of those variables, under independent variables, which are the key independent variables you are going to study? And which are key dependent variables you are going to study? Then the other question would be, what are the anticipated relationships among the variables identified? Anticipated relationships. Is it direct proportionality, where when you increase independent variable, the dependent variable increases, or when you reduce the independent variable, the dependent variable reduces? Or when you increase independent variable, the other variable goes down? So these are phenomena that are within our socio-political and economic environment. Then, what hypothesis, if any, does the applicant have on the variables identified? You see, it is hardly for us to assume that to assume that you don't know anything about what you are going to research about. Yes, if you don't know anything about that, that is when you use questions. And in that case, you make use of theoretical framework, because theoretical framework will guide you. But if you understand, if you know something, and therefore you are only going to the field to prove or nullify, you have to use hypotheses. Yeah, you have to use hypotheses, because hypotheses are statements that are proposed by the researcher within and to how far his knowledge is about to the field of study. Now, after you have done that, what else are you going to do? Now you move to step 4. Formulate a possible research topic or title based on the answers above. So in particular, once you are clear on your variables and anticipated relationship, it becomes clear to formulate a tentative topic for investigation, which will be discussed and approved by your supervisor. You come up with something, then you present to your supervisor, who will look at it critically and see if it is meeting the threshold of a topic, the minimum threshold of a topic, which can be researched on. So the title should not exceed 20 words and should be clear and concise. Very clear. When we read it, we should be able to see clearly what you are going to research on. So after that step, you move to step 5. So what do you do in step 5? Do any of your questions lend themselves to a research hypothesis? Meaning, are the questions you have developed above in themselves lead or lend themselves to a research hypothesis? So what are we saying here? I want you to take it serious. If so, write out any hypothesis. A research hypothesis is an educated guess about relationships that may explain behavior and phenomena. A hypothesis is an educated guess which can be able to explain the relationship in a behavior and phenomena. Sometimes we refer to our research hypothesis as our thesis of thesis. Let me come again. Sometimes we refer to our research hypothesis as our thesis, singular, or thesis, plural. If research hypotheses involve quantitative data, they may be tested statistically through statistical hypothesis testing. T-test, what test? Note that developing hypotheses may require some preliminary research or prior knowledge, which is why hypothesis is called an educated guess. You are not just guessing. First of all, you need to have prior knowledge about the variables. And if you don't have, you need to do a preliminary research about the variables before you can be able to change the questions you have set into hypothesis. And this is the reason why we call hypothesis educated guess. Now, after you finish that step, you move to step 6, where we are saying identify the ideal evidence data and how you probably try to gather that evidence. That is your methodology. Show us your methodology. How, yes, how, first of all, you have identified ideal evidence, which is data. But you have also to show us how you are going to gather, to collect data. So you are giving us the methodology you will use. And therefore, when we look at the methodology, we as university supervisors, when we look at the methodology you have chosen and we look at what you are going to collect, we can be able to correlate. We can be able to say, okay, this method will help you to collect this type of data. So, you are very likely to need multiple types of evidence data. So the methodology you will probably have to use will include the following. That I'm just going to look at now. Number 1, review literature on history through secondary sources about the area of your proposed research. Why do you do this? Why do you carry out secondary data collection or research before you would go to the field? This will help you to establish and confirm that actually the topic you have chosen has not been researched on, and therefore there is knowledge gap which requires to be filled. Even if other scholars have done research on the same topic, but the way they have done it or the time they did it would differ, and even where they did it will differ from what you are going to do, where you are going to do it, and the time you are going to do it. Number 2, think about what type of data you may need to conduct your study and address your curiosity. What type of data? Is it quantitative? Is it qualitative? Yeah. Then number 3, think about the methods you are likely to use to get the data that you wish. For example, if you are to interview rebels, you have to use snowballing kind of method of data collection, and if not sampling, because these are people you cannot just interact with. No. Yes. Then think about the population and a sample from which you are likely to get the information. So think about the population from the area you are going to carry out your study. So you have to know the characteristics of the population, the number, the population census, aggregation of gender, generally characteristics of that population. Because when you are sampling, the sample size is correlated to the total population or target population. Then, that's the sample size. But you see, this sample will have its content. So is your sample size going to be homogeneous or heterogeneous? Meaning, will it have uniform participants or mixed up participants? And this will be dictated by the nature, the characteristics of the population, unless it is a purposive sampling. Then lastly, think about how you are likely to analyze the data that you may collect, because this data you are going to collect can be both quantitative and qualitative. So the tools, the instruments you use to analyze quantitative data like SPSS, Excel, and what have you, could be different from the way you will analyze qualitative data. Step 7, write a concept paper. Now, so this under academic writing would be what we call drafting stage. Drafting stage. Write a concept paper. How do you do this? Draw on what you have developed in terms of areas of curiosity. Research questions, research hypotheses, data sources, and methodology. Draw a lot from that when you are writing. Begin with a very direct and explicit statement of your area of interest and your research questions. Yes. Just start with a very direct and explicit statement. Yeah. Then this should take about 1 paragraph. Move on to state your research hypothesis or thesis statement. And remember, thesis statement. Thesis statement is a sentence that introduces the main idea of the whole research. Or if it was an essay, the whole essay. Yes. So this should take another paragraph or so. Then conclude with the discussion of your proposed methodology. Tell us how you are going to do it. Yeah, tell us how you're going to do it. Yeah, this should take another paragraph. So the entire concept paper should be at least 2 pages and not be more than 10 pages, and should be double spaced. Citations are appropriate if you used any sources in developing your concept paper. Please acknowledge, do in-text citation. Then step 8, before turning in your concept paper, meaning before handing in your concept paper to your supervisor for evaluation and confirmation, go through the checklist below to make sure your concept paper is of the highest quality possible. Don't rush. Use this checklist. Number 1, are you proposing to research something that is really of interest to you? Interest doesn't mean making you happy only. No. Is it your area of study? Is it your area of interest? Or if it is a problem in the society, is it an interesting problem of which you are going to seek solution from the data you will collect? Number 2, are your research questions truly appropriate for academic inquiry, or are they more appropriate for causal I mean, what we call the casual, just casual or non-scholarly consideration. Is what you are going to do scholarly work? Is it academic? Or is it just anything, collecting data for whatever reason? Number 3, you ask yourself, are your research questions actual questions that can be researched through academic means, meaning through library sources, interviews, surveys, etc.? Are your questions researchable? That's what I'm saying. Are your questions researchable? Or are they opinions or attitudes that can't really be researched? Is it a wishful thinking? Then you look at checklist number 4, where you are asking yourself, does your concept paper attempt to research an area of interest to you and ask and propose to and answer specific questions? Or is it trying to solve some problem, finding solutions to problems is not appropriate for a research paper? Although you may make policy recommendations as a result of your findings. We use research findings for action, what we could call action research, action-oriented research. We can have policy-oriented research so that policymakers can use the findings from your research to make appropriate changes to existing policies or to outrightly come up with a new policy. Yes. Number 5, are your questions specific or they are general? Because when your questions are general, it becomes difficult to respondents or interviewees to understand what you are asking for. But when they are specific, it becomes easier for respondents and even the interviewees to respond accordingly. Checklist number 6, are your questions answerable through research? Meaning here, you try these questions on people and see how they take them up. And it will show you whether your questions can really solicit answers. Number 7, have you stated at least one hypothesis, research or statistical? Then number 8, have you identified the data you will need and how you will get it? So identifying and how you will get it will form methodology. Then lastly, have you included citations, if appropriate, and a reference list or bibliography? Now here, I'll want to give the distinction between list of reference and bibliography. List of references will take in the list of authors, titles of their materials, and this should only be sources that you have cited in your concept paper. But when it comes to bibliography, this will include what you have cited in your text or your concept paper, plus what else you read, but of which you didn't cite. in your concept paper. So let me give you the summary of what I have just put across to you. Summary of the concept development process. Number one, identify a broad researchable field. Broad. Then number two, generate an area of interest, meaning you are now narrowing. You are now becoming specific. Number three, frame questions. Number four, formulate research topic, which might be broad and you narrow it. Number five, formulate hypotheses. Number six, do what we call methodology mapping. Number seven, write up a concept paper. Number eight, you do checklisting of your concept paper structure. Number nine, which is the last one, concept paper submission. Now you are complacent, you are convinced that what you have done is the correct thing, and therefore boldly you just submit to your dean or your supervisor for evaluation. Next, we want to look at structure of the concept paper. Structure of the concept paper. So, I'm encouraging conformity. I'm encouraging conformity. I'm encouraging conformity. Yes, I'm encouraging conformity. So what am I doing? What I'm doing here, I'm giving you a guide and I'm encouraging you for uniformity, which is in assessment of the concept papers, where all applicants should restructure their concept papers, taking into account the preceding process guidelines, because every university will give a guideline how you develop your concept paper. So cover page, what are we supposed to see on the cover page? So this will include the title of your research, your names as they appear in the academic documents, the area of specialization of the PhD or master's as advertised, and months and date on the cover page. Then we have another page or another area which we call introduction. So in the introduction, briefly tells us about the area of your proposed interest and why such an area is of significance to study. Then under introduction, you also justify why. Give the rationale, justification. Why such an area is of utmost importance to do research about. So introduction should not be more than 3 paragraphs. Then we come to problem statement. Problem statement. Here, briefly state what the problem of the investigation will be for the proposed study. Give evidence of the magnitude of the problem by either giving the statistics where applicable or citations. Do that. In the problem statement, you also do citations. You cite why what you are going to research on is a problem, because there are other authors, other scholars who have pointed out that what you are going to research on is actually a problem that needs intervention. Remember, remember, your problem can be theoretical or practical. Whichever you opt to address, make sure you have convicted the problem. And this can be only 2 paragraphs. What are we saying here? The problem could be theoretical, meaning it's to do with existing theories that are not working, or they are working officially, or they have lost their relevance. Or practical. Yeah. So after that, after the problem statement, come up with research questions, objectives, and hypotheses. You come up with research questions, objectives, and hypotheses. So how do you do this? Formulate the key questions which your study intends to explore. The questions should be in harmony with the formulated objectives and any hypothesis, if any, given the natural relationships among the 3. What are we saying here? Here we have questions, we have hypotheses, we have objectives. So how do you generate them? First, come up with objectives. From the objectives, you generate questions. From your questions, you can also change your questions into hypotheses, meaning into an academic guess. So here, we are saying that not more than 6 research questions, objectives, or even hypotheses should be formulated. It should not go beyond 5 or 4. After you have done that, what else do you do? You come up with a literature review. So briefly review the current literature about the proposed area of research. Use journals, sources, and primary sources like dissertations within your area of specialization. At this level, you can show how current you are aware of the debates and developments within your chosen area of research. And literature review should be only about 2 to 3 pages. And this will be adequate. Then after you finish with the literature review, do a brief methodology. So finally, you should briefly describe the methodology you intend to follow in conducting the proposed research. You need to show in this methodology the research orientation in terms of research paradigm, qualitative, quantitative, or both. So in the methodology, you tell us the research design, yeah, whether explanatory, exploratory, analytical, descriptive. It's very important. Then lastly, we come to references. In concept notes or concept papers, you don't write the appendices, no. References is quite enough. So what are we saying? References, this is the last part of your concept paper, which should be a list of references, all works cited in the text, and ensure you follow the American Psychological association style of referencing, APA. Its guidelines are available on the World Wide Web. Some of this information is very available, and therefore don't say you didn't get the information, but just agree that maybe you are not serious with what you are doing. So unless you have a question, a comment, a suggestion, you can do that in the Google class. Otherwise, for now, I want to say thank you for attending to this lesson. Thank you, and thank you very much. See you in another encounter. See you in another what? In another